This is Zach. He's a 15-year-old freshman at Unioto High School in Chillicothe, Ohio. This is his mother, Rebecca Collins. She is what we affectionately call the mama bear. She's extremely protective of her son. And for those of you that did see what happened, it would make your stomach turn. As I indicated, we've reached out to the school district. We're hopeful that they will be responsive. And I think at this point it may be appropriate if Ms. Collins has any observations to make. Do you have anything to say, Ms. Collins? Not necessary. I didn't mean to put him or her on the spot, but I wanted you to put a face with the action that we're proposing. We're optimistic that the school district will take appropriate action and will make certain that all students are protected in the future, and these types of things are not permitted to happen at any time in the future. I want you to see that. Any questions?
James, can you tell us what you're seeking with this suit?
We're seeking protection. What we want to do is make certain that all school districts understand and appreciate the fact that students have the absolute right to be safe in their school environment. The school system that's in question does have an anti-bullying policy, but the problem is that it wasn't enforced. It was a policy that was on paper, and students like Zach have been harassed, bullied, and in this case, actually viciously beaten, and nothing has been done. So we're optimistic that the school district will be inclined to recognize the obvious, that they will appreciate the fact that under state law, they've got a lot of responsibilities, one of which is to make certain that these types of things do not happen again. It's not enough to have a policy on paper, but the policy must have some meaning, it must have teeth. Problems of this nature have to be reported, and should be reported, and then corrective action should be taken.
How would you have liked this situation to be handled in the first place? What would have been the reaction from the school district that would have not, gotten the ACLU involved or not led to that needing to happen?
Well, the first thing is they should have a meaningful policy in place. They do have a policy, but there's some serious questions as to whether or not instances of bullying were actually reported. If they were reported, then there's questions as to whether or not anything was done after it was reported. It's not enough to recognize or learn that a student has been bullied, beaten, harassed, intimidated. It must go further than that. It's the school district's responsibility to make certain that students can learn in a safe, secure environment. Had they taken some of the reports of bullying more seriously, then maybe this would never have happened. They didn't take it very seriously. They didn't take appropriate action to prevent it from occurring in the future. And then we have a situation where a student is viciously beaten. What we've got to do is reach out to school districts, and hopefully they'll be responsive to our concerns so that students can go to school, receive an education without fear, without concern, without being beaten and intimidated and harassed, because as we all recognize, not much education can go on in that kind of an environment.
But what should the school have immediately done?
First of all, when the reports were immediately made to them, they should have immediately responded. They should have found out who did what would be the appropriate punishment, and what type of protection could be put in place so that this would not happen. They dropped the ball. After it happened, they should take a strong look at their anti-bullying policy to make sure that it covers students like Zach. They should also make certain that the bullies are excluded from the school and the retaliation doesn't occur, because there have been some instances where students, after they were the victims, were further retaliated against by other students. Administrators have got to take these types of instances seriously. They've got to make certain that when a student reports that he or she is a victim of being bullied, that swift and decisive action is undertaken to make certain that it doesn't happen again, to make certain that the people that perpetrated are excluded from the school or appropriately punished, and to make certain that a policy is in place to guarantee that the students, all students, would be free of these types of incidents.
What is Zach's status now? Is he going to school, and where does that stand?
Yes, he's back in school. He, however, has been subjected to some taunts by other students and some indifference on the part of certain educators in the school. So to answer your question directly, yes, he is back in school. Hopefully he'll have an uneventful school year, and hopefully the school will put in place some type of policy so that their anti-bullying policy will in fact have some meaning.
Has the ACLU been involved in cases like this
The
before?
ACLU has been involved in cases like this all over the country. We take this very seriously. We understand and appreciate what the state law says. We understand and appreciate the fact that there are certain federal protections also in place. And we will be exploring, hopefully with the school district, various options and various things that they can do to make certain that this does not happen again.
Have you been involved in cases like this in Ohio, or is this a first?
Well, there have been cases like this in Ohio. I don't know how much litigation has gone on. I do know that some lawsuits were filed up in Mentor, Ohio, for some bullying. I do know that other lawyers have looked at these types of issues. I know that school districts in some places take this as a pretty serious issue. We think it's very important. There's a case pending in the Northern District of Ohio right now, in which you may have heard about. The student committed suicide after they were bullied unmercifully. And this is potentially the ultimate outcome unless it's addressed and addressed decisively.
Is there a pattern of behavior at this particular school, or is Zach the only one that really has experienced this?
There have been other bullies at the school. Bullying is not new. It's not unique. How much of an issue it actually is at this particular high school will be determined.
How will that be determined?
Well, it depends on what action we are obligated to undertake. It may be determined in what we call the discovery process. It may be determined if we request open records information on how extensive this issue is. Hopefully the school district will be inclined to step forward and let us know exactly how many times this has happened over the past school year. Now, we have found that they do submit a report. I'm not sure when that report went into effect, but the report is kind of a bare bones type of report. It doesn't give us any real understanding as to the nature and extent of the problem. And these are issues that we're going to have to flesh out in the coming weeks and months.
What is your understanding of the status of the student charged with assaulting Zach?
My understanding of the status is that the student entered an admission to a charge of assault.
I mean, as far as his punishment by the school district, do you know what?
I've received conflicting reports. Initially, I understood that the student received a 3-day suspension. Subsequently, I understand that after the incident went viral on the internet, that the student's punishment might have been enhanced. Now, exactly what that punishment is by the school district, we have not yet been able to determine. Initially, it was 3 days. It's maybe something more now.
Can you give us, sorry,
Go ahead.
can you give us a sense for the nature of the bullying that Zach endured, particularly leading up to the incident in question?
Well, Zach was pushed. Expletives were directed towards him. His mother reported this to school officials. Zach reported it to school officials. Nothing was done. After a period of time, it became an exercise in futility. And Zach started to feel that we're not accomplishing anything. So after you are bullied for so long, you turn the other cheek and you become a little insensitive to the bullying. And for that reason, it's incumbent upon the school district to take decisive action, not after the fact, but when the first incident of bullying is reported, so that it does not become a bigger issue.
How about what led up to this particular incident? Can you be specific at all about what you all feel precipitated the alleged attack?
Well, you'll have to ask the person that committed the act what led up to it. What we do know is that it obviously was premeditated. What we do know is that a student was recording the incident, and there was some conversation about Zach being attacked prior to the time that it happened. What actually led up to it, we'll have to find out. But that's something that the school district should be focused on. The school district should have known that this was going to happen. The school district should have taken appropriate action. The school district should have protected Zach, and they failed.
Is it a matter of monitoring every student's Facebook page, or I mean, how do you? I don't know how many students are in that school, but how do you do that? I mean.
Well, I'm not suggesting that a school district take out an account on Facebook and assign an administrator to monitor Facebook, but I am suggesting that if a student reports that he or she was bullied, it's incumbent upon the school district to take some decisive action, to investigate it, to find out who did what, who said what, and what might occur in the future. And unless or until they're inclined to do that, I think we will continue to have problems in violation of both state and federal law.
And did they fail to do that in this case particular? I mean, I know there was a record leading up to, but had they been, had the imminent sort of threat been reported prior to this?
Threats had been reported. This particular threat may not have been reported, but there were other incidents which, had they been reported, then it may not have escalated into what happened on October 17th.
What do you think should have been done at the very onset when these threats were reported? Should they have had an assembly, spoken about how to treat one another, or what would you have liked to have seen?
That's a step. It's not the ultimate solution, but it would be a step. You see, having a policy in place and not enforcing that policy is tantamount to not having any policy at all. So if there is a policy in place, if when incidents of bullying are reported, if the administration took them seriously and called in the people that were involved, if the administration were inclined to have counselors on hand experienced in dealing with harassment, bullying, assaults, and batteries, then you wouldn't have this type of a situation. Unfortunately, that, from what I can gather, was not the case at this particular high school.
Do you know exactly what their policy was and what they failed to do within their own policy?
Well, they have a policy in place because I've read the policy. Exactly when the policy went into effect remains to be seen. The problem is not with the policy. The problem is enforcing the policy. Because if they have a policy in place but don't bother to enforce it, or if they blow off allegations of bullying, if they take the position that, well, this is not all that serious because kids will be kids, then it tends to escalate. If you have a policy with no teeth, then you've not accomplished a great deal. And from what we can gather, that's kind of the situation that we have.
Would it be possible to hear from Zach about some of these?
I have no